Then we will move into new business. And first item then is actually approving our final budget adjustments for 2010-11, closing our books, and then of course reviewing our designations of fund balances.
The first thing we'll take a look at is year-end 2010-11 for expenditures versus revenue. And if we take a look at this sheet right here, you will see, I can try to blow this up maybe just a tad bit more. You will, that's not helping that. Maybe that'll work. You will see total expenditure revenues of $32,235,961.62 versus total expenditures of $32,133,743.61 for a difference of $102,218. So we had revenues over expenses of $102,218. Of that $102,218, $86,160 is designated for other post-employee benefits payout. So what we did when we our retirement language, if you recall, probably 3 or 4 years ago, it's getting to be now, we changed the language, and basically the new language says we will deposit $1,500 per year into an account for each new staff member hired after the 2008-9 school year, I believe it is. And this year, the total that we deposited for those staff members, or need to deposit, is $86,160. So in the end, we have $16,058 revenues over expenses. So out of a $32 million budget, I'm feeling pretty good that we were able to expend all but $16,058. Now, I need to kind of just qualify that statement. The reason I say I'm excited that we're able to spend all of that $32 million is in some ways we don't get rewarded for saving that money. If we don't spend that money, then we will lose state aid on it. Okay, so that means for whatever dollars we don't spend, we'll lose that on aid the following year, and that's probably the biggest impact. So if we get aided at 62% on every dollar that we spend, or 65, so that means if we spend $100,000, we're not going to get aided on about $65,000 of that $100,000 that we spend. So we'll lose that aid for this up and coming year. So we kind of get boxed in a little bit like that. If we spend it the following year after that, we will get that money back if we spend it out of fund balances. But as we all know, when we put money in fund balance, we don't like to spend the money in fund balance, because that's basically, I don't want to say a rainy day fund, but if we should have an emergency, we'd like to have that money on hand. And when we look at the fund balance of $4,159,000, or actually 4.2, that doesn't mean every day of the school year we have $4.2 million in the bank. It only means for one moment in time, when the auditors were here on June 30th, we had $4.2 million. And then the money is moving in and out as we have expenses and cash flow issues that we need to move in out. And you know that in November and in June we have to borrow money to cover our cash flow. So if we didn't have if we had plenty of money in the fund balance, we wouldn't have to short-term borrow, but we don't even have enough money in the fund balance to cover that. Now, are we going to be able to get $3-4 million in the fund balance and we don't have to short-term borrow? Not likely. You know, we're going to use that money and make sure that that's getting back to the kids in some form or fashion. If not there, you know, we're not going to ask the taxpayers to fund that, because we're able to get by with what we got. But we just got to keep that in mind when we're talking about fund balance. Then in Fund 21, you can see revenues or expenditures exceeded revenues by approximately $15,500. This is expendable, non-expendable gifts. When we're looking at this, monies that we receive from donations is accounted for in this area. So this is non-taxpayer money. Fund 27 is special education. We always do that fund transfer from Fund 10 to 27. And there can now be no beginning or ending fund balance there, so every year revenues need to equal expenditures. And so if we need to add money, we take money from Fund 10. If we need to, if we can decrease it, then we would decrease the amount we're taking to Fund 10 in order to make this balance. Native American is a federal grant, and again, that should be at or near balancing. Debt service, I talked about earlier, we have approximately $395,209 at the beginning of this year. Expenses exceeded revenues by about $12,200, as you can see in the difference here. So you can see our ending fund balance of $383,030. And then Capital Projects Fund 45 is our debt service. You can see the ending fund balance at $23,056. And then in food service, we had a beginning fund balance of about $195,000 there, and we wanted to do some updates to some of our food service equipment, like you saw with the grant that we applied for here. So we did purchase some new equipment here, and you're seeing a new ending fund balance then of about $113,000, and that's where we like to see that. You know, if we're going to be able to have we would rather take, I should say, the money after $100,000 in fund balance and increase the quality of our food rather than add it to our fund balance. So between that and equipment, that's what Jesse's been trying to do, is again add to the quality of the food service program. Then finally, Fund 72 is our scholarships. Again, you can see that was decreased by about $61. And then the employee trust fund that we set up so that we can primarily just get aided on our post-retirement health insurance that we're paying out for Fund 27. They require us to put in $53,443. So that's 5% of that. The total that you see there, actually it's slightly more than that. So these are unaudited. Our auditors are on site as we speak, or they're probably home now, but they'll be back the next couple days. So you know, we do know in Fund 10 there will be expenditures will increase, as well as revenues by about $9,000, and that's because we were coding in Fund 21 some dollars that were spent there that should have been coded in Fund 10, so kind of minor, but you know, until the auditor goes through, we're biting our fingernails making sure everything lines up the way it needs to, because as important as the budget is, finishing up the school year so that we're not over budget or under budget is important, because, you know, although we have a $32 million budget, if you go over $50,000 or expenses are $50,000 higher in your revenue and you start decreasing that fund balance, that's not viewed as really a positive thing, although it's a small amount of money. In comparison to $32 million, I'd much rather add $50,000 to the fund balance. I think people view that better. But I think we're well on our way again this year. So a lot of hard work from the office staff. So that would be, I guess, the first place that I would start. The next thing that we need to then do is look at our budget adjustments. Typically, we update the budget from what we present at the annual meeting. We'll update again at the end of October, which is what you're seeing over here in this column where it says approved budget. This is what was approved in October, at the end of October, and then we adjusted the budget where we're at today, or at the end of June 30th, so you can see the budget as approved in October, and what we're asking you to approve, and overall the budget decreased by $232,704.75. So we're pretty pleased with that too, considering the percentage that is on a $32,000 budget. So, and then you can take a look at the revenues, changes there, and then the expenses in Fund 27. And then there is a requirement that this is posted, I believe, within 10 days of these changes that were made here to the public. So I don't know if you have any questions regarding these budget adjustments. We talked about them for a while at Finance Committee earlier tonight. Again, the $290,000 change, where you're seeing a decrease of $724,000 versus in the $120,000 account where you're seeing the increase of $654,000. This is primarily due to that transaction in Fund 73 where we don't budget for that expenditures of about $1 million where you're putting in money, and then basically it's really, I can't explain it any better than a shell game. you put money in the bank, you leave it there for one 24-hour period, and then you take it right back out, except for that 5% that's required to stay in there. So it's kind of a goofy setup. But if you want to get aided, which is equivalent to about 27% for those special education dollars we spend on retirement, that's what we have to do. So that's why you're seeing some of those changes there. Any questions on the adjustments? Then, if you didn't have questions on that, then the last thing that we should probably talk about is the redesignations of the fund balance. It used to be really easy where we could kind of just redesignate those and just list basically Fund 10 as to where those dollars, because they were either looked at as being designated for future encumbrances or for cash flow purposes or whatever. But with, last month we approved the policy for fund balance appropriations, if you remember. So as we're taking a look at this sheet, if you take that treasurer's report that you were given, you will see the $86,160 that is restricted, and again, that's for that $1,500 that we're adding for that we have to pay for those individuals for their retirement on an annual basis, and then unassigned in fund balance would be an additional $16,058. So overall, you're seeing an increase in the fund balance of $102,218, and those numbers should be what we just reviewed. And you can see that for the various funds there, as we just talked about. So as you make your motion to close the books, I would ask that you approve those as presented in this article title, or basically handle titled the 2010-11 ending fund balance as of 6/30/2011. So if anybody had any specific questions, they would be able to go to this sheet to see where those designations, and they are in accordance with GASB. And yes, we probably will be coming back and asking you to modify these again, because again, the auditors have not been through, and they will find some minor changes. So we'll have to have you redesignate those fund balances at some time in the future. And we had the same conversation last year and the year before and the year before that. So I think that's everything that we talked about at finance. I don't think I missed anything.
Okay, then I would look for a motion to approve the 2010-11 budget adjustments as presented, close the books for the 2010-11 school year, and approve the designated fund balances as listed on the 2010-11 ending fund balance sheet dated 6/30/2011.
So moved.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second then to approve that motion as presented. Is there any further discussion? Questions? Okay. Then I guess we will do a roll call vote.
Pam.
Yes.
Judy.
Yes.
Gary.
Yes.
Mary Ellen.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Deb.
Yes.